Hello, my name is Chester Kalesa, and I'm the Historic Site Administrator here at the Anthracite Heritage Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The museum is administered by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, and it's located here in McDade Park in the western part of Scranton on the border with Taylor, Pennsylvania. And we're also located adjacent to the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour. I'm standing here in the main exhibit hall and the exhibit entitled Anthracite People, which focuses on immigration and ethnicity in Pennsylvania's hard coal region. And the first artifact that I'd like to talk about is anthracite, because anthracite is why the people came to this area. And anthracite is known as hard coal. And if we think about hard coal, in northeastern Pennsylvania, we have about 484 square miles of historic deposits of anthracite coal. And this represents about 75% of all the known deposits of anthracite that are in the world. So I think this area is pretty special when it comes to this ranking of coal. And anthracite is the highest ranking of coal. The other coal below this would be bituminous coal or soft coal. And then below soft coal would be lignite or brown coal. And below that would be peat. So as we can see, it's very good to have this high ranking of coal because it burns with less impurities, less smoke. So it's a very high source of carbon. It's almost pure carbon with little impurities. Now, as I mentioned, this exhibit focuses on the people that came to this region of northeastern Pennsylvania. And one of the earliest peoples in northeastern Pennsylvania were the Native Americans. And here we have a Native American canoe. And the Native Americans used wood. And some of the early coming settlers to the region also used wood. And we have a sled bob with some logs on the sled that you see here. And these early settlers were not unlike the Native Americans in that they were also in the age of wood. So wood was used for building homes, building various types of objects that the early colonists needed, and also for fuel. So wood was burned in the home and used as a heating source. In the 18th century, we see the transition from this age of wood starting to the age of coal and the discovery of anthracite. And we have a print in the exhibit, the discovery of anthracite coal in 1791. And this was, I think, a typical situation of how anthracite was found by early settlers, and with the anthracite coal appearing underneath the roots of the trees. Now, the Native Americans were very aware of their environment, of course, and they knew the anthracite was present. However, the Native Americans did not use anthracite coal as a heating source. As we said earlier, they used wood, but they did know that it was here in the region. So many early settlers had experiences in Europe, and they were familiar with burning coal in Europe. And when they began to come into the anthracite region, they purchased land and began to speculate that, of course, these lands would be profitable with the production of coal. And the earliest coal mining was very much in the way of surface mining. And here we have a print from Harper's New Monthly Magazine, 1857, which shows the great open quarry of the Lehigh. And essentially what people are doing is removing the overburden with picks and shovels and carrying away the anthracite coal with wheelbarrows and wagons, and then selling it to market. So it's in the 19th century that we see anthracite beginning to develop a market. And the way to develop the market, a couple of different things was needed. One of the aspects that was needed was transportation. Some of the early methods of transportation was by wagon, but roads were very, very primitive and difficult to traverse. Arcs were also used on rivers to float the coal to market. And then later, canals were developed to get coal to market. So Transportation was very important, and the development of transportation in the 19th century was critical to getting anthracite coal to market. Another aspect of the use of anthracite coal related to the types of vessels that coal could be burned in. And here we see an exhibit panel on the Fell grate, and this was designed and built by Judge Jesse Fell of Wilkes-Barre. And this is a very early reproduction grate from 1808. And the anthracite was placed on the grate and then burned in a fireplace. Later, we had more sophisticated ways of burning anthracite. For example, a knot parlor stove about 1830, designed and built by Effla Knott. And these types of parlor stoves would be in various cities in the early 19th century. For example, New York City, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston. And this was a way for burning anthracite coal. So having these types of vessels to burn anthracite coal and the transportation methods to get coal to market, these were very important innovations to help spur the anthracite industry in the 19th century. Now, also, we needed the people to work in the anthracite industry. And that relates to part of the story of this exhibit is immigration ethnicity. Now, some of the early immigrants were from Northern and Western Europe, and we have some of those images and artifacts in this section of the exhibit. Now, later in the 19th and the early 20th century, there were other immigrants from Europe who also wanted to participate in this growing economy. And those immigrants were from Eastern and Southern Europe. And we have some of the images and artifacts in this section of the exhibit. Well, these immigrants came into the anthracite region and they found themselves in the shadow of the coal breaker. And the coal breakers in the anthracite region really dominated the landscape. They were multi-story buildings, such as this photograph of the Lorry breaker near Wilkes-Barre. And these buildings crushed, sized, and cleaned the raw underground mine coal that was being brought to them. And here we can see some of the artifacts related to the coal breaker. Here we have a button crusher, which crushed coal into the small sizes that you see here. And we burn this small size type of coal here at the Anthracite Heritage Museum in our coal furnace. And you see some of the screens for larger size coal, and also some of the crusher teeth for various size coal in this area. So this was the job of the coal breaker, to turn anthracite coal into a usable product for the consumer. In this case, we can see some of the various sizes of anthracite coal that have been prepared in the coal breaker. And these size standards were very common in the early 20th century, late 19th century. And one of the things that I tell people is that for anthracite coal to be used properly, it must be prepared in a coal breaker. Anthracite only burns efficiently if all of the pieces are the same size. So, for example, during the Civil War, the USS Monitor would burn lump-size anthracite. Now, those lumps were roughly all about the same size. Here at the Anthracite Museum, I mentioned that we burn a buckwheat size piece of anthracite. Now all those pieces are about the same size. So you don't mix or intermix various pieces. Anthracite burns all along the edges, so you want it to be evenly sized for air to come through, burn along those edges efficiently, and then you can shake out the ashes. And then the ash is the waste material from the burning of the anthracite coal. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the delivery of anthracite coal, and here we see a 2-ton coal wagon. Many people in the anthracite region had coal bins in their basement for their coal furnaces. We have a coal bin here at the Anthracite Museum, and the chute from the wagon would be put down into the basement window, and then the customer could ask for 1 or 2 tons, how much they want it delivered for their furnace. So these wagons would roll pretty much on a regular basis, delivering coal to customers, and wagons were eventually replaced by trucks. And sometimes in the anthracite region, if you're fortunate, you can still see a coal truck delivering coal to people, just as we have coal delivered here to the museum. I would also like to talk about the colliery. The colliery, again, the central focal point was the building of the coal breaker that we just talked about, but the colliery was really the full workings of the coal company. So all of the ancillary buildings in addition to the coal breaker would be located at the colliery. And the collieries had particular names. We have a large photograph reproduction of the Marvin Colliery in Scranton. It was operated by the Hudson Coal Company, and this particular image was photographed by John Horgan Jr. about 1921. The Sprague and Henwood drilling rig that we see here, this was a gasoline engine and a pump, but on some parts of the colliery property they might want to explore for other deposits of anthracite, so they could actually core drill with a diamond bit, and they could see what the stratigraphy looked like with cores, and then determine if they wanted to drive another shaft on the colliery property. So a colliery property might have several mines. These could be shaft mines, slope mines, drift mines, that they were collecting underground anthracite, they were mining it, and then bringing it to a central point at the coal breaker for the crushing, sizing, and cleaning that we talked about before trains would take it away to market to other cities, or the wagons or trucks would deliver to people for their coal bins locally. Now let's talk about some other buildings of a colliery. We get a good example of that over here. Here we have an exhibit of a wash house or a change house, or some people know this as a shifting shanty. This was a building where the mine workers could come to change into their working clothes, and at the end of the day they could remove their dirty working clothes, take a shower, and then change into their street clothes and then go home to their families. So the shifting shanty or the wash house was a way of leaving the dirt at the mine, and it was really part of health and safety for the mine worker. And these types of buildings started in the early 20th century as part of the health and safety and hygiene for mine workers. And you see the radiator there against the wall. That was giving off heat from probably an anthracite furnace. The heat was rising, drying the wet, dirty clothes. They could let them down the next day and change into them. They would generally take their clothes home once a week to be laundered. Usually Monday was wash day because there was less dust in the air, because the collieries generally didn't operate on Sundays. So I think this is great efficiency of space also, because you can consider you could have wash houses with lockers, but if you had this chain and basket system on pulleys, you're getting double the storage space with the height. You're just simply using all that space above. If we didn't have that space above or this system, we'd need additional space on the floor of lockers for people to store their clothing and their working items. So a good efficiency of space.
The following is a public service announcement test to determine if you need a fishing license and boat registration before you head out on the water. Let us begin. Are you a pelican? Does this look like your house? Is this your idea of fishing with friends? Do you use your feet as fishing hooks? Are you your own boat? Do you have webbed feet? No, I mean like a... That's the one. Do you want this in your favorite lake? Yuck, yike. No thanks, mister. Regardless how you answered, you need to be licensed and registered because it helps local conservation efforts protect the very natural resources you enjoy boating and fishing in for generations to come. Do your part at takemefishing.org.
When I grow up, I want to be a psychologist or a therapist.
I want to be a pediatrician.
I was hoping to become a chef someday.
I want to own a big house with the convertible and the jacuzzi and the pool, you know, all the good stuff.
Role models, they don't tell you what to do, but they help you to go where you're going.
I want to study law. I don't want to become a lawyer. I want to become a CIA agent.
Young people, I think, do need a mentor because, you know, we don't know everything. And, you know, all the people, they've experienced stuff that we haven't.
I would like to be a baseball player.
As long as there's somebody behind you, pushing you and supporting you, then you feel that you always have the strength to keep going.
Well, I would like to become like a doctor. That's my first choice.
Sometimes you feel down and you feel that no one really understands and no one knows like where you're coming from. And it's great to see someone who's been where you are now and, you know, making it.
So get involved and do your part. Invest in the future. Mentor a child.
I'd like to talk about just the dangerous occupation that mining was. And we really lived in a region of doctors and many good doctors. This is an exhibit of Dr. Druffner's office about 1924. And we can see some of the artifacts in the doctor's office. It's interesting, in 1924, a house call by Dr. Druffner from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. would cost about $2. House call after 7 p.m. would be $3. And for an office visit, it was $1.50. Now, Dr. Druffner had a separate room that miners could enter as opposed to the general public, because many miners, if they had to go for treatment, they might come in their work clothes be dirty. So there was a separate room for them to enter. So if other customers were coming, other patients that were, say, in their street clothes, they could be in a separate waiting room. If we look at just how dangerous the anthracite mining industry is, we could look at Ed Conrad's research from just the period of 1870 to 1993. And that does not cover all of anthracite mining because, as I said, anthracite mining really dates from the very early 19th century and continues up to the present. And just for this period alone, Ed Conrad has been able to show a death toll of anthracite miners of almost 31,000 individuals. And there were many more individuals that were injured in the anthracite mines, both men and boys. So a very, very dangerous occupation. And it spurred America's industrial first aid safety, which occurred in German Pennsylvania, is credited with the birthplace of industrial first aid in America. And it was Dr. Matthew Shields of German who worked with miners to organize the first aid to the injured class on October 25th, 1899. And this was an inspiration from the First Aid Association of Germany. These were a group of immigrant mine workers from the British Isles, and they were familiar with the St. John's Ambulance Corps. So this First Aid Association of German Pennsylvania held meetings and classes on Friday evenings at 7:30 in the Old Carpenter's Hall at the Farmers Hotel, which is now the Windsor Hotel in German. There they would practice first aid, they would roll bandages, they would have things prepared, because this preparation was essential when a man was injured underground, because there was only so much time if he was to be saved, and the miners knew that they had to prepare for that, and they did so. And this really took hold in the 20th century and became very, very professional in the mines. I'd also like to talk about the immigrants and also the labor movement for the United Mine Workers. And here we have a portrait of John Mitchell. And some visitors may be familiar in downtown Scranton on Courthouse Square. There's a very beautiful monument to John Mitchell. And he's known as the champion of labor and defender of human rights. And he was involved with the United Mine Workers of America as president during the great anthracite coal strikes of 1900 and 1902. So these were very important advances for mine workers, and it really ushered in a golden era for Scranton and for the anthracite region from about the period of 1902 to 1922. Before the Depression, it was very good for labor working in the mines and some of the achievements that they made through the United Mine Workers of America. I mentioned already that anthracite was used as a heating source, and I talked about furnaces and that we burned it here at the Anthracite Heritage Museum. But also anthracite could be burned to power steam engines, whether they be stationary steam engines such as the one on the exhibit here, or you could have locomotives that were powered by anthracite, and also steamships. I mentioned, for example, during the Civil War, the USS Monitor burned anthracite coal as a power source. So you have anthracite being used both for heating. It's a very good source of domestic heating because it gives off less smoke and impurities, but it also was a good form of transportation as well, energy source. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk about another industry here in the anthracite region of northeastern Pennsylvania. Now, this section of the exhibit focuses on the textile mills. We've been talking thus far throughout the exhibit about the anthracite coal industry and the role of the men and boys in the anthracite industry working in the mines and the coal breakers. But here we have a different industry, and this was the silk mills in this part of the exhibit. And these were the workplaces of many women and children. Now, some men and boys did work in the silk industry, that's true. But the mines were really closed for women and girls to work in. That was not a place girls and women worked in the late 19th, early 20th century. Today, of course, there are women miners. But the silk mill owners, when they thought about moving to the anthracite region in the 1880s, they knew there was a large workforce of women and girls who could work in their mills. They also knew that their various machines were powered by anthracite steam engines, so therefore they had the fuel here in anthracite, and they knew that the transportation was well established with the railroads, so that they knew that they could get raw silk product in and they could get finished silk products out to market. So it really was a good fit for them to come to northeastern Pennsylvania and establish silk manufacturing. And by 1915, 75% of all the raw silk that was processed in the United States of America was processed in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania was a leader in that aspect, just as it was as a leader in anthracite coal production.
I believe that home is where your pet is. That loving an animal means never giving up on them, never letting them go.
I believe that when you adopt an animal from a shelter, you're saving not only one, but many lives.
And that when you spay or neuter your dogs and cats, you help decrease the number of homeless animals.
That it's time we do all we can to save the lives of homeless animals who are counting on us, because every dog and cat deserves a place to call home.
I believe that I found my best friend in a shelter, and that you can too.
We believe that together with Best Friends Animal Society,
we can bring about a time when there are no more homeless pets.
Please visit our website at ambassadors.bestfriends.org to find out more.
For the millions living with COPD, breathing becomes a real struggle. COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but you may have heard of it as chronic bronchitis or emphysema. Over time, it makes it harder and harder to breathe until you feel like you're breathing through a straw. COPD is the 4th leading cause of death in the U.S. It kills 1 person every 4 minutes, and it took my grandmother. An estimated 24 million Americans are affected, but as many as half of them don't even know it. It's a race against time to spread the word about this serious disease. If you're over 35 and have ever smoked, you could be at risk. The good news is, there are steps you can take to improve your symptoms. I'm Danica Patrick, and I drive for COPD. Take action today to breathe better tomorrow. Join the movement at driveforcopd.com, take our screening questionnaire today, and talk to your doctor.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest, I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
At the Scranton Iron Furnaces on 159 Cedar Avenue in downtown Scranton, we are having our annual Arts on Fire Festival. The first night is June 7th, which is Friday night from 8 to 11. There is a charge for that night. It's $20 at the door, but we'll have a nighttime iron pour with a Bessemer converter, so that should be very interesting to see that. We'll also have food and music that night. The following day, June 8th, Saturday from 11 to 7, we'll have our Arts on Fire Festival, and we'll continue on Sunday, June 9th from 11 to 4. And both Saturday and Sunday are free and open to the public. There'll be art for purchase by people. There'll also be food and beverages for purchase as well, and we'll have music during those days. So I think it's a great time to experience industrial heritage, plus to enjoy some of the industrial arts that the art vendors will have.